It lasted less than a second. That was the thing about it. Less than 1 second. The motion of a hand, sharp, deliberate, aimed downward at something small. The sound of it. The way the small hand recoiled. The way the little girl looked at her own hand afterward, confused. The way children look at something they do not yet have the vocabulary for. It lasted less than a second. But the man standing in the doorway of his own living room had been still for much longer than that. He had come home early. He had not announced it. He had come through the front door of his house in Cherry Creek, Denver, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and he had heard voices, and he had walked toward them, and he had stopped in the doorway, and he had watched. And what he had watched in that less than 1 second had done something to him that 38 years of a life built on composure and precision and the careful management of everything he felt had not prepared him for. It had made everything very simple. Simple in the way that only certain moments are simple, when everything complicated falls away, and what is left is just the truth, clean and clear, and requiring nothing except acknowledgement. He stood in the doorway. The little girl was looking at her hand, and Nathan Cole, one of the most successful venture capitalists in the Rocky Mountain region, a man who had built his reputation on seeing exactly what was in front of him without the distortion of what he wanted to see, saw exactly what was in front of him. And he stepped into the room. "Hey, welcome back, everyone! I am so glad you are here. This is the place where we tell the stories that reach inside you and hold something there long after the video ends. Stories about the moments that make everything simple. Before we begin, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city and your country in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now, because today's story is one that will stay with you. Stay until the very end. Let's begin. Denver sits at the base of the Rockies, like a city that has not yet decided if it belongs to the mountains or to the plains, and has decided, sensibly, that it does not need to choose. It is a city of layers. The layer that visitors see, the 16th Street Mall, the art museums, the restaurants in Reno and Lohi, the particular clean western light that falls on the city in the afternoons and makes everything look like it was designed to be looked at, and the layer underneath, the layer of the people who make the first layer possible, who clean the houses in Cherry Creek and Washington Park and the Highlands, who show up before the city wakes up and leave after it settles and move through its most beautiful spaces with the precision of people who understand that their presence in those spaces is conditional on their invisibility within them. Her name was Amara. Amara Collins, 31 years old, born in Aurora, Colorado, the daughter of a Ghanaian father who had come to Denver in 1989 with an engineering degree and a determination that had not accounted for how many doors would be closed to that degree in that era, and a Black American mother who had grown up in Five Points when Five Points was still entirely itself and had the specific pride of a woman who knew exactly where she came from and what it meant. Amara had grown up between these two inheritances, her father's quiet persistence, her mother's fierce dignity, and had assembled from them a character that was, at its core, unshakable. She had been cleaning houses in Cherry Creek for 6 years. She was meticulous, precise. She had the eye of someone who had been taught to see, her father's engineering precision applied to the specific art of understanding how spaces worked and what they needed. She moved through houses the way water moves through landscape, finding the exact path required, missing nothing, leaving everything better. She had been working in the Cole House on Steel Street for 18 months. The Cole House was not what people expected when they heard venture capital and Cherry Creek. It was not glass and steel and the performed minimalism of people who want their wealth to look like restraint. It was a 1920s craftsman, warm wood, deep porches, a garden that Nathan's late mother had planted and that Nathan maintained with the stubbornness of someone who understands that some things must be kept, regardless of the effort they cost. It had bookshelves that were used, a kitchen that was cooked in, floors that had been lived on long enough to show it in the most beautiful possible way. It was, in every sense of the word, a home. Nathan Cole had grown up in it. His parents had bought it when he was 4 years old, back when Cherry Creek was a different kind of neighborhood, before the money had arrived and transformed it into something that required a different kind of money to live in. His father had been a high school history teacher. His mother had been a pediatric nurse. They had bought the craftsman on a teacher's and a nurse's combined salary, and they had made it the kind of home that a person carries with them for the rest of their life, as a standard everything else is measured against. His father had been gone for 11 years, his mother for 3. Nathan had kept the house. He ran his venture capital firm, Coal Mountain Capital, from an office in Lodo. But he came home to the craftsman on Steel Street every evening, and he maintained the garden his mother had planted, and he cooked in the kitchen that still had her handwriting on a recipe card taped to the inside of the cabinet above the stove. He was, in the specific way of people who have lost the people who made them, someone who understood exactly what mattered and spent his professional life pretending that other things mattered more. He was also, at 38, about to make the worst decision of his life, or had been, until a Tuesday afternoon in October changed the geometry of everything. The woman's name was Claire Ashton, 35, the daughter of a Denver real estate dynasty that had been buying and selling the city's most significant properties for 40 years. She was precise and beautiful and moved through Denver's social and professional landscape with the complete ease of someone who had been raised inside it and had never once been made to feel that she did not belong in every room she entered. She and Nathan had been together for 10 months. She was accomplished. His professional circle respected her. His friends liked her. And Nathan, who had spent 3 years after his mother's death, building his firm and his life with the focused intensity of someone who has decided that work is the only thing that does not leave, had allowed himself to believe that what he felt with Claire, which was comfortable, which was functional, which was the absence of loneliness without quite being its opposite, was enough. He had been planning to propose. He had the ring. He had been carrying it for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, telling himself that the hesitation he felt was normal, that every person felt this before a proposal, that the thing underneath the hesitation that had no name was simply fear, and fear was manageable. He had not yet understood what the thing underneath was. He would understand it on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Less than 1 second was all it took. Amara did not bring Isla to work. This is important. Isla was 3 years old, Amara's daughter, a child of complete and focused intensity who approached everything she did, eating, playing, observing the world, with the seriousness of someone taking detailed notes. She had Amara's precision and her grandfather's quiet persistence and the specific quality of children who have been raised by someone who pays attention. She paid attention to everything. Isla did not come to work with Amara. She came to the Cole house on Steel Street on the Tuesday in October because Nathan had called Amara that morning about an additional cleaning task. The guest rooms needed preparation for a visitor arriving Thursday, and Amara had said yes before she remembered that her mother, who normally watched Isla on Tuesdays, had a doctor's appointment that afternoon. She had called Nathan back. She had explained. Nathan had said, without hesitation, without conditions, without making it into a thing that required management, bring her. The house is big enough. She can play in the garden if the weather holds. The weather had held. Amara had set Isla up in the garden with her outdoor things, the chalk, the small watering can she used to water the plants with focused seriousness, the garden gloves that were too big for her hands, but that she wore anyway because they were her grandmother's, and she had decided they were hers now. Isla had been in the garden for 2 hours. She had been completely content. The garden was full of things to look at. Nathan's mother's roses, still blooming in the late October warmth, the small fountain near the back fence, the way the afternoon light came through the ash trees and made patterns on the grass that Isla had been studying with the focused attention of a researcher. She had come inside only once, for water. She had come through the back door into the kitchen, which was where Amara was working, and Amara had given her water and a small apple sliced the way she liked it, and sent her back to the garden. Isla had taken her water and her apple. She had gone back through the house toward the garden door. She had passed through the living room. Claire was in the living room. Claire had arrived at the house at 2:15. She had a key. Nathan had given it to her 6 months ago as a gesture of the seriousness of the relationship, and she used it with the frequency of someone who had decided that the space it opened was already partly hers. She had not known Isla was there. She had not known Amara was there. She rarely tracked Amara's schedule, not from hostility, but from the same practiced blankness with which she regarded all the people who maintained the spaces she moved through. She had come into the living room and set her bag on the sofa and taken out her laptop, and she was reading something on the screen when Isla came through. Isla had not seen Claire immediately. She was carrying her water cup carefully in both hands, the focused, two-handed carry of a child who has been told that cups do not carry themselves and who has taken this information seriously. She was looking at the cup. She was almost at the garden door. She passed the coffee table. Her elbow caught the edge of Nathan's mother's ceramic bowl, the blue and white one, hand-painted, that had sat on that coffee table for 30 years, and it rocked. Isla grabbed for it with one hand. She caught it. The bowl did not fall. She had saved it. She looked at it, relieved, and then carefully set it back in its exact position, the way her mother had taught her to be careful with other people's things. And in that moment, a 3-year-old child carefully replacing a bowl she had almost knocked over, her small face showing the focused relief of someone who has caught something important. Claire reached across from the sofa and slapped her hand. Not hard, not leaving a mark, but sharp, deliberate. The motion of someone who has decided that a boundary has been crossed and is correcting it with the ease of someone who has never once considered whether they have the right. "Don't touch things that aren't yours," she said. Isla pulled her hand back. She looked at it. She looked at the bowl. She looked at Claire with the enormous, serious, processing gaze of a child who is trying to understand something that does not make sense. She had not broken the bowl. She had saved it. She had put it back carefully. She had done the right thing, and something had happened to her hand that she did not have the vocabulary for yet. She did not cry. She was Amara's daughter. She did not cry. She just stood there, with her hand against her chest, looking at it. And Nathan Cole stepped out of the doorway. He had come home at 2:30, a meeting canceled. He had driven back from Lodo with the windows down, the October air sharp and clean off the mountains, thinking about nothing in particular and everything in general the way you think when you are driving, and the city is familiar enough that the driving requires nothing. He had come through the front door. He had heard Claire's voice in the living room and had walked toward it. He had stopped in the doorway at the exact moment Claire's hand had moved. He had seen everything. He stood in the doorway for the 3 seconds after, watching Isla look at her hand, watching her look at the bowl, watching her look at Claire with those enormous processing eyes. Something moved through him in those 3 seconds that reorganized everything. Not anger, though anger was part of it. Something larger than anger. Something that connected to the recipe card in his mother's handwriting above the stove, and the garden his mother had planted, and the 30 years that bowl had sat on that table, and the specific understanding that some things are sacred, not because of what they cost, but because of what they represent. And a child's hand, a 3-year-old's hand against her chest, was the most sacred thing in the room. He stepped into the living room. Claire looked up. She saw his face. Something in her expression shifted immediately. The recalibration of someone who understands in a single second that a calculation has gone catastrophically wrong. "Nathan," she said. "Don't," he said. One word, completely quiet. He walked past her. He crouched down in front of Isla. He looked at her hand still held against her chest. "Can I see?" he said. His voice was completely gentle. Isla looked at him. She had met Nathan before. He was the man whose house this was, the tall man who always said hello to her directly and never through her mother, the man who had once crouched down in the garden to show her which of the roses her grandmother had planted first. She knew he was safe. She held out her hand. He looked at it. No mark, no injury, but he held it for a moment. This small hand, this 3-year-old hand that had reached out to save a bowl and had been slapped for it, and something in his face that 38 years of Colorado composure had built very carefully, came apart very quietly. "You did the right thing," he told her. "With the bowl? You caught it. That was exactly right." Isla looked at him. "She said don't touch," Isla said. "I know," he said. She was wrong. Isla processed this. "It's your grandma's bowl," she said. "Mama told me." Nathan looked at her. "Yes," he said. "It is. I didn't want it to break," Isla said. "I know," he said. "Thank you for catching it." Isla nodded, satisfied that this had been correctly understood. She went to the garden door and went back outside to her chalk and her watering can and her grandmother's oversized garden gloves and the patterns the ash tree light made on the grass. Nathan stood up. He turned around. Hit that like button right now if Nathan just did something to you. Because that is what a good man looks like. Not in the grand gestures, not in the public moments, but in the 3 seconds after something wrong happens in his own living room when he thinks nobody important is watching. Subscribe right now because there are more stories like this one coming and you do not want to miss them. Let's keep going. Claire was still on the sofa. Her laptop was closed now, both hands in her lap. The particular posture of someone who has decided that composure is the only remaining option. "It was a reflex," she said. "Don't," Nathan said again. "Nathan, I barely..." "Claire." He said her name the way you say something when you want it to carry the weight of everything you are not going to say after it. "I watched it. From the doorway. It was not a reflex. You saw her touch the bowl and you made a decision." Claire looked at him. "She was touching your things. She was catching my mother's bowl," he said, "that she had almost knocked over. She caught it and put it back and you hit her hand for it." The room was quiet. Outside, through the garden door, the sound of chalk on stone. Isla, completely absorbed in whatever she was creating on the garden path. "She is 3 years old," Nathan said. "She is in my house because I told her mother to bring her. She is a child in my mother's garden, catching my mother's bowl from falling, and you..." He stopped. He looked at the bowl on the coffee table. Blue and white, hand-painted, 30 years on that table. He looked at Claire. "I have been carrying a ring for 3 weeks," he said, "waiting for the right moment, telling myself the hesitation I felt was normal." He paused. "It was not normal. It was information, and I did not listen to it until 30 seconds ago." Claire stared at him. "You are ending this," she said, "over a child touching a bowl." "I am ending this," Nathan said, "over who you are when you think nobody who matters is watching." The room was completely silent. Claire looked at him for a long moment. She picked up her laptop. She picked up her bag. She stood. She looked at the garden door, where through the glass Isla was visible, crouched over her chalkwork, completely absorbed. "She didn't even cry," Claire said, and there was something in her voice. Not remorse, not quite, but something adjacent to it. The observation of a person who has understood, too late, what they have revealed. "No," Nathan said. "She didn't." Claire walked out the front door. It closed behind her. Nathan stood in the living room of his parents' house for a long moment. He looked at his mother's bowl. He looked at the garden door. He walked through it. Isla was on the garden path with her chalk. She had drawn what appeared to be a very detailed map of something. Roads, buildings, small figures. It covered most of the paving stones near the fountain. Nathan crouched down beside her. He looked at the map. "What is this?" he asked. "Denver," Isla said, without looking up from her work. "Where is this street?" Isla pointed to a chalk line near the fountain. "That one is this one," she said. "Steel Street. Where are we?" Isla pointed to a small chalk square near a chalk tree. "Here," she said. "This is the house with the roses." Nathan looked at the chalk house. He looked at the chalk roses beside it. He looked at Isla drawing with the focused precision of someone who sees exactly what is in front of her and renders it without distortion. "Isla," he said. "Yes. Are you okay?" Isla looked at her hand. She flexed her fingers. She looked back at her drawing. "Yes," she said. "It didn't really hurt. It should not have happened." "No," she agreed, with the matter-of-fact clarity of a 3-year-old who has assessed a situation and arrived at a conclusion. "It should not." Nathan sat back on his heels. He looked at the chalk map of Denver spread across his mother's garden path. At the chalk house with the chalk roses. At this child sitting in his mother's garden, in his mother's oversized garden gloves, drawing the neighborhood with the precision of someone who has been taught to pay attention to the world around her. "Your mother taught you to draw like this?" he asked. "She taught me to look first," Isla said. "Then draw." "That is good advice." "She has a lot of good advice," Isla said. "Sometimes I listen." Nathan smiled. "The first real one of the afternoon. Sometimes is better than never," he said. Isla considered this. "Yes," she agreed. "That is also good advice. Share this story right now with someone who needs to see it today. One tap, because what just happened in that garden, a man sitting on his heels in the October light, next to a 3-year-old and her chalk map of Denver, is the kind of moment that reminds you what actually matters and who actually sees it. Send this to someone. Right now, let's keep going." Amara came through the garden door at 4 o'clock to collect Isla. She stopped when she saw Nathan sitting on the garden path beside her daughter, both of them looking at the chalk map with the seriousness of two people engaged in a significant geographical discussion. She looked at the living room through the glass door. Claire was not there. She looked back at Nathan and Isla. Something in her chest, the particular antenna of a mother, the one that operates below conscious thought, had been sending signals for the last hour and a half. Small things, the sound of a door, the quality of the silence from the living room, the way Isla had come back into the kitchen briefly for her water and had been quieter than usual. Amara had cleaned and said nothing. She was good at that. "Mama," Isla said, without looking up from the map. "Come look. I made Denver." Amara came into the garden. She looked at the chalk map. She looked at Nathan. He looked at her. And in that look, no words, just the specific communication of two people who are both very good at reading rooms and have just read the same one. Something passed between them that was complete. "She okay?" Amara said, quietly. "She is great," Nathan said. "She caught my mother's bowl from falling, and then she drew the neighborhood." Amara looked at Isla. Isla looked up at her mother, with the clear eyes of a child whose conscience is entirely clean. "I caught it," she confirmed. "It didn't break." "Good girl," Amara said. She looked at Nathan. "What happened?" she said, still quietly. The directness of a woman who does not have time for circumnavigation. Nathan looked at the garden, at the roses, at the chalk map on the path. "Something that should not have happened," he said, "and something that needed to happen, both at the same time." Amara looked at him for a long moment. She was a woman who had spent 6 years reading houses and the people in them. She understood spaces. She understood what they revealed when the performance stopped. What she saw in Nathan Cole sitting on his mother's garden path in October was a man who had just arrived somewhere he had been moving toward for a long time without knowing it. "Is Claire coming back?" she asked. "No," he said. Amara nodded once. She crouched down beside Isla. "Time to go, baby," she said. "Can we take a picture of Denver first?" Isla asked. "Yes," Amara said. She took out her phone. She photographed the chalk map, the chalk streets, the chalk houses, the chalk roses beside the chalk house on Steel Street. Isla watched the photograph being taken with satisfaction. "Now it will last," she said. "Now it will last," Amara agreed. She began collecting Isla's things: the chalk, the watering can, the oversized garden gloves. "Amara," Nathan said. She looked at him. He was still sitting on the path. He looked like a man who had taken something out and put it down and was not yet sure what to pick up next. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't," she said. "I do," he said. "This is your workplace, and something happened here today that should not have happened in your workplace. Regardless of anything else, that is mine to own." Amara looked at him. She slapped her hand. Amara said, "Not a question. Yes," because she caught the bowl. "Yes." Amara was quiet for a moment. She looked at Isla pulling on the oversized garden gloves with focused concentration. "Isla," she said, "did it hurt?" "Not really," Isla said. "But it was not nice." "No," Amara said. "It was not." She looked at Nathan. "Thank you," she said, "for what you said to her. I heard you from the kitchen. That you told her she did the right thing." "She did," Nathan said simply. "She knows that," Amara said. But it matters that you said it." Nathan looked at Isla, who had successfully achieved the garden gloves, and was now looking at her chalk Denver with the satisfied expression of an artist reviewing completed work. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said. "You can ask," Amara said. "How does she do that?" he said. "Just move on. Something happens that should not happen, and she assesses it and names it and moves forward. No residue." Amara looked at her daughter. "She learned it from watching me," she said simply. "You do not always have the luxury of carrying things. Sometimes you put them down and keep going." "That sounds like strength," Nathan said. "It is survival," Amara said. "They are not always the same thing." Nathan looked at her. The October afternoon was turning toward evening, the mountain light going gold behind the ash trees, the garden going warm and quiet around them. "Amara," he said. "Nathan, I want to be honest with you about something." He paused. "I have been honest with very few people about very few things for the last 3 years. Since my mother. I built a very effective wall, and I have been living behind it and calling it composure." He stopped. "Watching your daughter catch my mother's bowl and put it back carefully, and then just stand there and look at it. Something happened to the wall." Amara was very still. "What are you saying?" she said carefully. "I am saying," he said, "that I would like to start over. Not from today. From before today. From the 18 months you have been coming to this house and I have been professionally courteous, and you have been professionally invisible, and we have both been performing something that was easier than the alternative. The alternative being," Amara said, "honesty," he said. "Starting with, I notice things. About you. About how you move through this house. About what you pay attention to and what you let go. About the specific way you hold yourself when you are working in a room that belongs to someone else. I have noticed all of it for 18 months, and I have said nothing because I built a very effective wall." Amara looked at him for a long moment. The garden was golden and quiet around them. Isla had moved to the fountain and was watching the water with her full absorbed attention. "Nathan," Amara said. "Yes. The wall. she said carefully, was also convenient. For both of us. I know, he said. I am not. This is not a simple thing you are saying. No, he said. It is not. I am not asking for it to be simple. I am asking for it to be honest. And I am asking if you would consider dinner. Not here. Not your workplace. Somewhere that belongs to neither of us. Amara looked at him. She looked at Isla at the fountain. She looked at the chalk map on the garden path. The chalk house with the chalk roses. She looked at the man sitting on his mother's garden path in October, who had watched something happen to her daughter and had stepped into the room. Isla, she called. Isla turned from the fountain. This is Nathan, Amara said. You know him? Yes, Isla said. He lives in the Rose House. He does, Amara said. He has asked if we would like to have dinner with him sometime. What do you think? Isla looked at Nathan with her full, assessing gaze. She took her time. She was thorough. Does he know a good place? She asked. I know several, Nathan said seriously. Does he know which ones have good bread? I will find out specifically, Nathan said. Isla considered this answer. She looked at her mother. She looked back at Nathan. Okay, she said. With the finality of a 3-year-old who has completed her due diligence and arrived at a position, she went back to the fountain. Amara looked at Nathan. Something in her, the wall that 6 years of working in other people's spaces and raising Isla alone and doing everything herself, had built with the patience and the precision of her father's engineering, moved. Not fell, moved, which was, she understood, enough for now. I will think about it, she said. That is all I am asking, he said. Right here is where I need you to do something. Share this story right now with one person who needs to be reminded that the people who see you really see you, not your function, not your category, but you, are worth paying attention to. One tap. That is all it takes. Subscribe right now because the stories coming next are ones you do not want to miss. Let's finish this. The dinner happened on a Saturday in November. Not elaborate, not performed. A small Italian place in Lohi that Nathan had researched with the thoroughness of a man who had been told that bread quality was a non-negotiable criterion and had taken this seriously. Amara had worn her good coat. Isla had worn her best dress and her opinion about the bread, which she delivered within 4 minutes of sitting down, and which was, after careful consideration, positive. It's warm, she said, with the satisfaction of someone whose standards have been met. I did my research, Nathan said. Good, Isla said, and she returned to the bread with focused contentment. Nathan looked at Amara across the table. Amara looked at Nathan, and between them, with Isla in the middle eating warm bread with complete focus, a conversation began that was not careful and was not managed and was not the performance of two people deciding whether they could tolerate each other. It was the conversation of two people who had been watching each other for 18 months through the specific distance of employer and employee and had accumulated, across that time, more understanding of each other than either of them had been willing to name. They named it now, not all at once, not dramatically, the way honest things happen between honest people, slowly, carefully, with the particular respect of two people who understand that what they are doing matters and does not deserve to be rushed. Isla fell asleep in the car on the way home. Amara carried her upstairs. Nathan had driven them. He stood at the door of Amara's apartment building when she came back down. Thank you, she said. For the bread, he said. For the bread, she agreed. A small smile. The first completely unguarded one he had seen. Amara, he said. Yes. The ring I was carrying, he said. I gave it back to the jeweler last Wednesday. I did not want it in the house. She looked at him. Okay, she said. I am not telling you that as a declaration, he said. I am telling you because I said I would be honest, and that is the honest thing. I know, she said. Is that Nathan? She said. Go home. It is late. And you did your research on the bread, and that counts for something. He looked at her. It counts for something, he said. It does, she said. And the smile again. Small and real, and the kind that reaches the parts of a face that cannot be performed. She went inside. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Denver around him, the November cold coming off the mountains, the city lit and quiet, the Rockies invisible in the dark but present, the way they are always present, felt rather than seen. He thought about a chalk map on a garden path, a hand held carefully against a small chest, a bowl that did not break because a 3-year-old had caught it. He thought about what his mother would have said. He thought she would have said that the people who catch things when they are falling are the people worth knowing. He walked back to his car. There are moments that last less than a second and contain everything. The motion of a hand, sharp and downward and aimed at something small. The sound of it. The recoil of a small hand against a small chest. Less than 1 second. But a man had been standing in a doorway. A man who had built his reputation on seeing exactly what was in front of him without the distortion of what he wanted to see. Who had spent 3 years behind a wall he called composure. Who had been carrying a ring for 3 weeks and telling himself the hesitation was fear. He had stepped into the room, not because he was performing goodness, not because he was managing a situation, because he had seen something true, and he was constitutionally incapable of pretending he had not. A child had caught his mother's bowl from falling. She had put it back carefully. She had done exactly the right thing, and someone had punished her for it, and a man in a doorway had watched all of it and had understood, in the specific clarity of that less than 1 second, that the hesitation he had been carrying for 3 weeks was not fear. It was information. It was his instincts telling him, in the only language they had, that something was wrong, that the life he was building with Claire was being built on a foundation that looked solid from the outside and was not solid underneath. It had taken a child with chalk-stained hands and her grandmother's oversized garden gloves to make that information impossible to ignore. She had not done it on purpose. She had just been in the garden, drawing Denver, watching the fountain, catching bowls, being exactly who she was, completely and without apology, in the middle of a house that had been built for exactly that kind of person, people who catch things when they are falling and put them back carefully and move forward without residue, and sometimes, when the light is right and the chalk is good, draw the whole neighborhood from memory. That is all she had done, and the whole world had shifted around it. If today's story moved you, please hit that like button right now. It costs you 1 second and it sends this to someone who needs it today. Subscribe, because there are more stories coming. More women like Amara, more children like Isla, more men who step out of doorways when they see something true. Share this today with someone who needs to be reminded that the people who see you are worth finding. And I will see you in the next one.